Alright, guys. I just finished watching this Batman The Dark Knight Returns, the cartoon. But let me tell you something, it's not a cartoon, it's a freaking movie. Okay? You're getting my reaction after just watching it. 5 minutes ago, I finished it. Went out tonight, got me a milkshake, spent the money to get this, sat down to watch it. Actually got excited on the way home to watch this after I got it in my hands. You know, it's like reality was hitting. Alright, Dark Knight Returns is prestige format miniseries. Came out in, I think, 86. And it's by Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, and Lynn Varley. I believe that's her name. And Lynn Varley, I think, is Frank Miller's wife. I'm not 100% sure. But, you know, this is the thing that rejuvenated Batman. You know, it's considered one of the top books from the 80s, you know, right there with Watchmen. And, you know, saw history in the making if you were there. And first time I read this story was in '89 after my grandmother bought me the complete leather-bound Frank Miller. Okay, so, you know, I feel like I've read the story quite a bit and stuff. So, you know, so going into this, you know, I was real excited because like these DC straight to DVD cartoons that they've been doing, you know, they've been hit or miss, but you know, I think 90% of them have just been phenomenal. I skipped the last two. I did not get Superman versus the Elite, and I did not get Justice League Doom because I was waiting on this. They are doing the 4-issue miniseries in 2 parts. Okay, I think these movies are only maybe 80 minutes, not even 80 minutes long. Anyway, it's a little bit over an hour if I remember right. And it's the perfect way to do it. It's the first one that they've done as a 2-parter, and this is a story that deserves it. Okay. The reason I'm saying that this is a movie is because by splitting up the story into 2 parts, the pacing was phenomenal. Okay, it breathed. They were able to slow things down. There's minor changes. They made this PG-13 rating. And I think they had to, because if you actually did the violence that was in the book, in the actual original book, it'd probably get an R rating. Okay, and there was minor changes that I was all right with. Now, going into this as it started, first thing I realized is that this was great because they enriched the story that was already there. It made me realize something that I hadn't noticed before in the story. In the future, it's 10 years in the future, Batman has retired, and you get the idea it's because of what happened to Jason Todd. When this story had come out, I don't believe they'd killed Jason Todd yet, or at least when Frank Miller was working on it. Okay, so 10 years later, he's a middle-aged old man. Commissioner Gordon is a month from retiring as commissioner. And what I noticed, though, after seeing this animated is when, at the beginning of the movie, when Jim and Bruce are sitting there having drinks and stuff, and you know, Jim obviously knows that Bruce Wayne was Batman. The magic of Batman is that Batman was the person and Bruce Wayne was the alter ego. That was the disguise. I never noticed how after he retired that he was Batman full time, and you saw Batman even though he wasn't in the costume, and he had a mustache, and Bruce Wayne looked a whole lot like his dad. But he wasn't Bruce. He was walking through the streets, and it's Batman. And it's like Batman is a demon inside of him, you know, bursting to come out. He's just hungry for a fight. Oh, you know, Gotham's gone downhill, and he's kind of reborn in the storm that comes. There's a big heat wave, and crime is just all over the place, and it's on TV. And then, bam, you get lightning, you get storms. He has a breakdown. He's back in the Batcave. He doesn't remember shaving. That's the story. You know, you get what's going on. A gang of mutants, and that's what they're called, the mutants. It's just a gang, and apparently there's thousands of them, or more or less running Gotham, more or less. There's streets, you know, they're all over the streets, and they're running everything. Now, before I get ahead of myself and stuff and give you the whole plot, it's worth watching. As you can tell, it's blown me away. Now, as it started out, I started noticing things that didn't have a lot of the inner monologue. Okay, Frank Miller wrote Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, as an anarchist in Reagan's America. They set this thing in the 80s, but it's not in your face. And that was the perfect way to do it. It is a period piece, but don't let that turn you off. Don't let the next thing I tell you to turn you off. But what I loved was the soundtrack in this. It was real subtle. when the movie started, I started thinking, oh no, this is going downhill because Peter Weller of RoboCop fame, Buckaroo Banzai, and he also has ties to Frank Miller because Frank Miller wrote the last two RoboCop films that Peter Weller was in, if I remember right. Now, that's just a cool little piece of trivia, but I'm stuck on the Kevin Conroy voice, so that's a matter of taste. Peter Weller did a phenomenal job, but I'm just a guy that when I hear Batman's voice and I read the books, it's Kevin Conroy from the 90s Batman cartoons. That's personal taste. That was not a minus at all. Peter Weller knocked it out of the park. Okay, way to go. The other thing is that where they didn't have that inner monologue that Batman said, that was the narrative in the story. That's where the film noir kind of talk of Batman came through. It took a little while to get used to that. The other thing is that Frank Miller's art in The Dark Knight Returns isn't consistent. It's kind of like jazz. The art's great all the way through, but he really doesn't draw the same character the same way throughout the book. And you really got to read the book a whole lot to pick up on what I'm saying. But what happened is I didn't think the art looked very Frank Millerish at first. But they were getting certain panels correct, the right ones, the perfect ones. They were getting certain iconic images like the bat signal on the great big huge building in Gotham. They got it right. And as the story got more and more as the movie progressed, stuff, it started looking more and more Frank Millerish. Okay, almost like a build-up. Now the soundtrack that I mentioned a minute ago, it's an 80s soundtrack, man. It reminded me of old John Carpenter movies like Escape from New York. It reminded me of Big Trouble in Little China, and a little bit of the keyboards that were kind of used in They Live. If you know those old movies. But it's not overbearing, man. It doesn't make the thing feel dated. It actually is perfect. It's the keyboards, and I'm not a fan of keyboards in music, but this was perfect for this movie. I mean, it just set a mood that was absolutely excellent. The other thing that I got a big kick out of that I wasn't expecting was Carrie Kelly Robin. Okay, I kind of fell in love with her, man. It's almost like this was the original hit girl from Kick-Ass without being psychotic and stuff. And they even got her 60s parent. Her parents were like hippies, in the book. And that's when she took off to be Robin. Her parents were so stoned and stuff. They kind of remember they had a daughter. And they have little references in there about the 60s. They got Jim Gordon as he's retiring. It's in the 80s because when the new commissioner comes in, I can't think of her name right now. He was talking about being a fossil and everything, and he started telling the story of World War II. How Truman, was it Truman? Roosevelt? How embarrassing. I'm forgetting my American history now, but just bear with me. Anyway, he was talking about how the president probably knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. And she was wondering, why are you telling me this story? He was like, well, maybe you'll figure it out. Because Batman is back. James Gordon is retiring. And you get all the build-up for part 2 that's coming, where the Joker smiles at the end because Batman is back. Before this, Joker has pretty much been docile to the point that they're spoon-feeding him his food, his mashed-up food in Asylum. And he's coming. So, little Easter eggs they had in there that I caught real quick, and I had to go back and pause it because I was like, did I just see that? Jim Gordon walks into a convenience store, and for a split second, there's a magazine rack. I think it's to Jim's left. It'd be our right when you're watching the TV. And on the magazine rack, they've got copies of Swamp Thing, V for Vendetta, and I saw Sandman, all for sale. Little cool things like that. And I'm sure if I go back and watch this, I may go back, in which I will. This is what's great about this is that I can tell that I'm going to watch this over and over and over. Okay, so I'm definitely going to get my money's worth. And the animation is excellent. They nailed the important parts. I got used to not. I've read The Dark Knight for so long, I was sort of filling in the gaps with what was supposed to have been, going through Batman's head, in the yellow panels in the book. I forgot all about that and just enjoyed it as a movie, And then they had the Batmobile. And the Batmobile here is a gigantic tank. And they nailed it. I mean, it was just amazing. They nailed Alfred with his little sarcastic remarks about him coming out of retirement and flipping out over Batman bringing in a new Robin. And the flashbacks to, I don't know how many times Batman's origin's been animated now and talked about. And Frank Miller did a phenomenal job in the book with what he did. And I actually was like, oh my God, here we go again. And they didn't do it Frank Miller style per se, but they got through it really quick. And I was like, good choice. You know, they didn't really rehash things. And, you know, I can go on and on, but I don't want to ruin the movie. But this thing is great, okay? I went in excited to watch it. It started to lose me, and then it brought me back. And by the end of it, I'm like, play it again. I'm ready to just sit down and watch it again. So, first reactions, go buy it, rent it, download it, whatever you got to do. I think it's awesome. So, all right, carry on.